Good morning, everybody. We'll just give a few seconds for people to join in. Thank you for joining us this morning for our next instalment of Meet the Chair and President. Delighted to have James Walker, Executive Chairman, and Jim Haden, President of BluGlass Limited, with us this morning. As many of you know, Jim recently was appointed President, so it's great to have him as part of this interview and talking to us about his background and what he sees as the opportunities. So given we've got a few people now in the room, I might hand across to James Walker, Executive Chairman, and just reminding everybody, if you have any questions you would like to be asked during the Q&A session, please type them into the Q&A box, not the chat, type them into the Q&A box, and then I'll moderate once we hear from James and Jim. James, over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ron. Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So very excited to introduce Jim Haden to you today. Jim, as you saw in the announcement a couple of weeks ago, has joined as President of BluGlass, and we're very excited to have Jim join and lead the team. And the reason why we are excited is when you look at his background, and Jim will talk to that later on today, his entire career has been in the laser dyed market, based in the US. So deep industry experience, not just with suppliers and customers and understanding the market and what's driving the market and where the technology is going in the future, but directly related to BluGlass is a long history of making products in this space. And that includes solving reliability issues, and Jim will talk to that when he comes on shortly, but a long history of working with multiple companies in this sector and getting them to product and manufacturing ready to produce products in this space, and direct experience in solving reliability problems, which is where BluGlass is at today, as you all know. So on that basis, we're lucky to have Jim join the team. Jim is leading the day-to-day operations of this business. And I'll let Jim now introduce himself and talk about his experiences and why he joined BluGlass.
Hi, thank you, James. Yeah, so as James says, my experience has been in the industrial laser, atmosphere diode lasers specifically. I started many years ago in a company called Spectre Diode Labs, where we grew from a $2 million quarter company to a $250 million. That is an exciting growth pattern, and we did that largely with becoming the world leader in 980 nanometer lasers that were used to drive the internet that we now use for meetings like this. After that, we merged with a company called JDS Uniphase in a $41 billion deal that was the largest technical merger at the time. And I remained at JDSU for about 5 years after that as director of operations, running our different facilities around the world that handled our semiconductor lasers. From there, I moved to a company called Coherent, where I was the director of operations and product line management, where I helped to resolve some yield problems they were facing and help grow that in a couple of years from a 30 million a year to a 50 million a year business. And from there, I went to a company, Enlight, that you may have heard of recently, who is now a world leader in fiber lasers. At the time I joined them, they were just trying to establish their product roadmap. And participated with them and helped them put a plan together that led them to the growth that they have today. From there, I began consulting, and I helped a company called Sora Laser Diode that was founded by Suji Nakamura, the inventor of the blue LED, and was able to help them. When I started helping them a few years ago, they had lasers that had insufficient reliability to meet their market demands. And what we were able to do in a year was get them qualified in headlights for the BMW vehicles. And those high beams that we did for them give the drivers 1.5 times the length of view from those headlights. And so it was a very exciting opportunity, which led to their merger with Kyocera, and they became KSLD. And so from there, that's how I came to know James and the BLG team. And I'm very excited to join a team that has such opportunity to go after markets that some of those other players are not addressing at the moment.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks, James. Just reminding everybody, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box, not the chat. And I'm going to be moderating the Q&A that will start now, and maybe just a couple of questions as people think through and type in some questions that they might have. Jim, you joined the company off the back of some reliability issues with its product. Given your background, what gives you certainty and encouragement, confidence, if you like, that those reliability issues can be addressed within the timeframes, obviously, that the company's discussed to get a product to market?
Well, as my description of my career, I've spent the last 3 decades working on semiconductor lasers, and though some of the products were different, the failures and the pitfalls are very similar in all of them. And so what that has led to is opportunities to move from one place to another and help resolve problems that are very similar. They may have nuances that are slightly different, but I've seen a lot of these problems before, and I'm confident that we'll be able to work through them just as we did as those other companies like Spectre Diode Labs, Enlight, Kyocera, SLD.
And maybe a question for James. I'm not sure that it can be fully answered, but something that's come in from the floor. What's been the progress in resolving the reliability issues over the past couple of months?
Yeah, no, so as we talked about in June and July as part of the capital raise, we've been running iterations since that time, and we are still working through those iterations to help solve the issues on reliability. I'll get Jim to talk to the actual issues we're focused on technically, but we've been running those iterations with our third-party suppliers. We've learnt a lot, and we still feel very comfortable that we can deliver a product in the timeframe that we've talked about, if not earlier, but in the timeframes that we've talked about. And maybe, Jim, you can talk on the 2 particular areas we've been focused on technically.
Okay. Well, there's problems that the team has identified with the metallizations. You need to have good metallization to get both the current in and the heat out of the laser. And we've seen some problems with the facets. And the facets are the parts of the laser where the light, exits so it could be used by the customer. And so what we're doing is we are investigating those using analytical techniques to determine what are the components that we could find on the lasers themselves, and then compare it to what should be there. And then we're using that to identify places in our process where we need to tune it up and fix it a bit.
Thank you. Sorry, Jim.
I just say another thing that we're doing is we're actually looking at good lasers too. And so we're looking at ones that are working better and those that aren't, and we're comparing what are the differences that we see, because part of the issue is we need to do is reduce the variation that with our vendors that we're using. So we're using those techniques to identify the problem areas and then reduce the variation around them.
Further question that's come through: when is the RPCVD laser diode expected to progress through the supply chain?
Do you want me to try this one, James?
Well, you have you to, Jim, and then I'll come in afterwards.
Okay. Well, we've talked about having a demonstrated product to get in the hands of the customer at the middle of next year. And I don't see a reason to change that timeline, but the team is working on both our standard MOCVD and adding in the RPCVD, and we're seeing good results in both of those that are coming out in the iterations that James alluded to that we are doing to resolve the problems.
Yeah, so the only thing I'll add to that is, of course, we're focused on the 405, the 420 and the 450 lasers with the MOCVD, the current practice. That is our focus in terms of getting products out to market. But in parallel, we are running those manufacturing processes through the RPCVD version of the laser diodes, but the focus is getting out the MOCVD laser diode products first.
Thanks. And is there a plan to move into blue and green laser diodes?
There's a short-term plan and a long-term plan. The short-term plan is to look at the 405, the 420, and the 450. The RPCVD will give us the ability to expand those wavelengths lower and higher. And so the focus right now is on those 3 primary wavelengths.
Okay. Maybe just moving out of some of the technical side of things into maybe a bit more of the day-to-day. Can you give a sense for people of what use there is for our product, and importantly, what are the end markets for it? What's the end market opportunity? Because you talked, Jim, before at the start about your background and the substantial growth in the companies that occurred whilst you've been involved with them. So pretty exciting opportunities, I would have thought, for BluGlass.
Yeah, there are some very exciting opportunities. The interesting thing, the opportunities could come in the electric vehicle market. And I talked about one of our, my former companies was working on headlights, but there's also in the electrical vehicle and in the cell phone market, there's batteries that need to be made. And these lasers could be instrumental in fabricating those. And really what it comes down to is you've got this visible light that is far more useful. It reflects less off the surface of these metals, and it does get absorbed more rather than passing through the metals. And some as high as 60 times the absorption, for instance, in copper. And copper is used quite a bit in the batteries for electrical vehicles and for cell phones. And so welding those batteries and manufacturing the batteries is very important as we move in those directions. Another area is in plastics. It's much easier to work with this blue light in plastic manufacturing, and that could be used to put cell phones together or computer monitors or the screens on televisions. So there's a lot of applications in those areas. And then there's also pretty exciting ones in the biomedical. The 405 wavelength, for instance, is useful for things like cancer detection. It could be used to find skin cancers and esophageal cancers. So there's a lot of excitement in those areas, and those are just a few.
Thanks, Jim. In terms of markets also, where do you see opportunities in terms of countries, and how do you think about the growth going forward to resource up appropriately to execute on those opportunities?
Well, there's opportunities, obviously here in the United States is one reason James and the team were looking to establish a presence here in the United States. There's both companies that may be interested in working with us as partners and becoming our customers. But then there's also a larger market when you go into microelectronics and car manufacturing around the world.
And in terms of the team, how do you think about, like I said, resourcing up to execute on those opportunities? Are you looking to change the team, build the team going forward?
I would say it's more of a building the team going forward. We, as you know, we are converting from a company that is a licensing intellectual property company to a company that is going to move from a specific way of growing the epitaxial, the RPCVD, to a company that's actually using that to make components and to make lasers. And those lasers need to meet the market demands that we're talking about. And so we need to have people that know how to design the components. They need to know how to then work right now with our outsourced partners. But as we start to grow and invest in the intellectual property required to build the components, we're also going to want to pull more and more of those resources in-house. And that way we will have more control over our destiny and be more valuable both to potential suitors and to our customers.
There's a lot going on, maybe a question for James. There's a lot going on in the company. How are you thinking about keeping shareholders informed of developments going forward?
Yeah, so there is a lot going on, and there's going to be lots of good progress coming. So a couple of ways we've thought about how we keep the shareholders informed, but also meeting the milestones. And the first part of that is Jim coming on as president. So Jim will come on as president to lead the day-to-day operations of the business, to focus on solving firstly the reliability issues, but then getting a product out to market and then building our presence in the market. So Jim has come on as the president. The board have asked me to stay on in an executive chair role, reduce capacity, but still as an executive chair to help, one, with that transition, but also to make sure that the company stays on top of the financial obligations, the reporting obligations, and ASX compliance and reporting. So there is a delineation of duties for a period of time while Jim focuses on getting a product out. So clearly, as part of that, we've got an AGM coming up in about 7 weeks' time where Jim will be presenting his plans for the business going forward, and there'll be regular updates as we make progress through those iterations on the product development. But, I think hopefully our shareholders have noticed over the last 4 or 5 months, there's probably been a little bit more interaction with us, particularly around the capital raising and the changes that we made at that time. So we will continue to keep our shareholders updated on as we progress through these issues at the moment, but more importantly, getting a product out in the future.
Great. And then in terms of, you mentioned the capital raising, James, maybe just another question for you. Company's now well funded to move to product by middle of next year?
Yeah, no, that's right. So we raised $8.5 million, as everyone on this call would know, in June and July through the capital raising through a placement, 2 placements, and then a rights issue that was well supported by existing shareholders. That means we are now well funded until we get a product out in the market. So no immediate needs to raise capital now, and we're funded through to get a product out in the market and starting to generate some revenue.
Great. Maybe back to Jim, as you think about, James talked about moving to getting product out to market. Any changes to the structure of the way the business is operating? How are you dealing with people, given you're based in the US and can't travel? Can you give us a sense of some thoughts around, particularly around how you're thinking about the business structure?
Yeah. So there are different tools that are available to us, and this is one of them, Zoom type of meetings where we're meeting regularly as a team and discussing our path forward. There, as you know, you're involved in a pretty tight lockdown there. Here in the US, it's not quite as bad. I flew out last week and visited, potential partners and partners that are already working with us, and was reaching out in California last week in Silicon Valley. And so I had some good meetings, some good connections, and then came back here, and I've been meeting with the team regularly and then having meetings like this. So those tools and online tools for collaboration are very helpful. And when things open up, I look forward to actually meeting the team in Silverwater in person and visiting your country, excuse me. And I think that we will continue to meet with our outsourced vendors here as well. And Brad and I are discussing how to do that and when.
In terms of your experience, Jim, some of those organizations you've worked at before, could they end up being customers of BluGlass?
Definitely, they could become customers. They have a couple of them already reached out to congratulate me and to probe to see what kind of products we are working on and to give me suggestions of what they'd like to see. So it's definitely a possibility.
And there's no clauses in there in terms of non-competes or otherwise restricting you from what you can do at BluGlass, given your prior background, and I think KSLD is a competitor?
Well, KSLD and I have a non-disclosure agreement, and so I cannot disclose to the company any of the trade secrets that are proprietary to KSLD. But as you know, I went to KSLD to help them solve problems, and that knowledge that I took there, if I couldn't use it to help them, I wouldn't have been able to help them. So I was able to, and I am able to use that kind of knowledge to help this team here. And also KSLD is, as I said, they're focused on white light. They're converting the blue to the white. We really want to go after markets that like the blue and the visible lights. And we want to use those wavelengths to get into the, like I said, into the electrical vehicle, battery welding, cell phone battery welding, sensing. Those are areas that interest us and the customers. And one reason that we're able to play in those areas is other companies right now are not. They're not addressing them.
So how much demand do you think there is for these products, the ones that we are going to be producing?
Well, there's a there's a good amount of demand, and it's coming from different places. I said some of the demand right now is being met by IR or fiber lasers, as you might know them. And so the market in those areas, as they grow, it's considered that the market, the diode level, is going to grow at 11% per year through 25, 26. But what we'll see is that we'll see some displacement of existing products, because these products will be more efficient and smaller, compact, and more, the cost of ownership, for instance, will be lower because we will have a higher efficiency overall, especially once we get the RPCVD. That will help us to become a much more high efficiency diode, which means it consumes less energy. So that is something that will help us, but then there will be new markets that start to appear as these wavelengths become more reliable and more readily available. And that's the same type of trend that we saw when fiber lasers were starting to take over the CO2 market. They were consuming the CO2 market, but enabling new markets as well.
Maybe a question for James from one of the participants on the call here. Has the micro LED and cascade foundry work picked up yet? You're on mute, sorry, James.
Sorry. So the micro LED foundry work that we have done in the past is continuing. It's not a focus for us, I must admit. So we are not spending a lot of time in that area. But micro LEDs is, of course, another validation of the RPCVD technology in a different industry, in a different space. So it will continue to be part of our story. But to be honest, getting products out in the market in the laser diode space is our focus, where we will be focusing for the short term. But once, as I've spoken about before, once we validate the technology in that particular area in laser diodes and have revenue and building a sustainable business, other areas like micro LEDs will continue to become more and more prevalent in what we do.
Another question that's just come in on the technology side. What's the timing for increasing the 2-inch wafer?
Increasing the size of the 2-inch?
Yep.
That comes down to our vendors' roadmaps. And right now, they're focusing more on increasing the quality of the 2-inch than they are on increasing the size. And there are a couple competing technologies to make those wafers. And we are looking at both of those technologies. We feel that one is doing a little better right now, but we're continuing to look at both. But in the near-term roadmaps are fixing the quality at 2 inches.
Okay. What do you see as, Jim, question for you, what do you see as, one, the key challenges, and two, the key opportunities for BluGlass in the short term and in the long term? We've kind of touched on some of them, but it's kind of a bit more specific. So, you know, the short term one is obviously going to be to improve and address the reliance issues. But what do you see as some of the challenges and opportunities for the business that we haven't talked about, short and longer term?
Yeah, well, I guess if you think and you back up, go up a little bit of ways from the reliability problem and so forth, really what it is we have to get a beachhead product. We have to get something out there that starts to delight the customers in a laser component. So they say, yes, BluGlass is a real company. There's somebody out there that can play in this world with the big guys like Nichia and Osram, and now what is being done at KSLD. And so once we establish that, then we can start to move from that beachhead, that small area, to larger and larger places by expanding our product portfolio. And I think that we will probably, a challenge in there is going to be able to, in the beginning, partner in such a way that we can grow into higher vertically integrated products. We want to be able to provide products that are configured in such a way, whether they're MOCVD or RPCVD, we need to configure in a way that our customers could use them that's more cost effective for their device integration. And that's where I think that we can get traction and flexibility. And that's the way we did it at Enlight, and also the way they did it at KSLD, because KSLD could not, compete head to head with Nichia. They just couldn't. They didn't have the volume. They didn't have the performance. And then at Enlight, we couldn't compete head to head with IPG. We didn't have the cost structure of our components to put fiber lasers out there that were as cost competitive and price competitive as theirs, but we could get the performance, and we had a roadmap to the cost because we packaged differently, and we were able to get them into customers' hands in a way that IPG wasn't willing to do. And we can do that here in a way that Nichia is not willing to do, and in a way that Kyocera SLD is not willing to do.
Okay, great. And then in terms of the way forward, should we be expecting revenues by the middle of next year, or is it product in customers' hands by the middle of next year to then generate revenues after that?
Yeah,
kind of rough timeframes. Doesn't have to be specific, obviously.
Yeah, I would say that getting by the middle of next year, we hope to have the product sampling as we're doing more reliability tests. Sampling may lead to a little bit of revenue, but really the revenue we're seeing is like 3 months after that. We're hoping to have bookings and revenue start flowing in, and by the end of the year, have a more reliable revenue stream.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that, of course, is if you look at Jim's KPIs to 30 June next year, it is heavily reliance-based, but there is a revenue component. So Jim is incentivized to make sure that that sampling and products out in the market generate some revenue by June. But most of his performance is based on getting products out in the market by that date. And then you see it flips. So up to December and after June next year and beyond, it flips to more revenue-based and then products as well. But the focus is some revenue by June and then growing revenue after that.
Great. Another question that's come in terms of key milestones, would one of them be demonstration of a packaged RP-CVD laser diode internally?
So in terms of milestones for
the company, for BluGlass. Yep.
Yeah, so clearly at some point, RP-CVD products in the market are important to us. But as I've just said, if you look at the KPIs that we've set for Jim and therefore the company to June, it is about getting MOCVD products in the market and in customers' hands by June. But we are continuing to work on RP-CVD. So those products will come out at some point in the future, but it's all between now and June about getting current products out in the market, 405, 420, 450 on the MOCVD versions.
So we don't have any other questions that have come in, and I'm conscious of everybody's time, and we're kind of coming up to sort of 30 minutes into the session. Maybe, Jim, are there any points that we haven't talked about that you think, in terms of how you're thinking about BluGlass, would be important to pass on to those participants on today's event?
I'd say, I guess, one thing that is a reason I joined is I saw, we're talking about MOCVD and RP-CVD. I saw the ability to take MOCVD products and work with an outsourced supply chain, really, to come up and get products. And I was impressed with what the team has achieved so far in that realm. And so then looking at, when, like James was saying, the progress has been made with RP-CVD and the micro LEDs and those types of flexibilities, I haven't seen some of those things before at other companies. So I think that is going to be very exciting, and how that we can grow from where we're at today and then put the roadmaps together to grow vertically integrated and then expand a portfolio in a wavelength range. I think those are very exciting and will open up new markets that we don't even know about yet.
Thanks, Jim. Lots happening, lots to look forward to. I might just hand back to James to wrap up today's session.
Great, thanks, Ron. So hopefully everyone enjoyed hearing from Jim and hearing Jim's plans, and really why we got Jim on board. I mean, his experiences are exactly what BluGlass needs at this stage. Direct experience and recent experience on exactly the issues that BluGlass is facing today. So confidence that we can move through this reliability issue fairly quickly. And then after that, Jim's experiences and networks and contacts will be a key driver in growing this company and moving us from an R&D company, which we have been, through to a technology development product manufacturing company in the future. So I'm very excited to have Jim on board. hopefully everyone else has got a sense of where we're going and what we're doing and how Jim will change what we've been doing so far. So really want to thank Ron and Mark and I for putting this on today, and hopefully the shareholders found this useful. So thanks a lot.
James, Jim, thank you very much for your time this morning. And if anybody has any further questions, please reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to answer them for you. So thanks again. Jim, congratulations on your appointment as president. Exciting times ahead, and looking forward to the development that you'll be able to achieve, both in terms of the technology and the commercialization. So, and with James and the team at BluGlass. So really looking forward to seeing the progress and the updates that come through. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.